So you've heard of good concept and bad execution. I think this set is a case of good execution of a bad concept. The UCS Death Star is the best version of a $1,000 Death Star diorama that could have possibly been made. Build-wise, it is very well done, but the concept of a $1,000 Death Star diorama was just doomed from the start. A lot of people are asking why they didn't make it a sphere, or at least half a sphere. I'm more in agreement with the people saying that realistically they couldn't have made a sphere or even a half sphere at that size. When trying to think about how I would have done this set, one of the things I thought of was maybe like a 3/4 sphere at a smaller scale where you could like rotate the pieces to have different parts of it be open at a given time, but the logistics of that might not actually be something that would work. The set isn't overpriced. It's worth the price piece-wise. $1,000 for 9,000 pieces is only slightly more than the coveted 10 cents per piece. But when you take a step back and look at it, it just doesn't feel like $1,000 worth of stuff. With all the engineering that went into it, it's essentially just a poster, but with depth to it.
Say that again?
It's essentially just a poster, but with depth to it. So maybe that's what it actually should be. Because this is really thin for a Death Star, but it's really thick for a piece of wall art.
All is good. Actually, on my first night out, I was Pterodactyl Man. But wouldn't you know it, people laughed at me. And I think that Batman works really well because I'm a huge bat, but I'm a tiny pterodactyl.
If you look at the world map set that LEGO did a few years ago, it's slightly shorter and a fair bit wider. It has 25% more pieces, but it's 75% less expensive. Obviously saying that is kind of cheating because almost all of the pieces are 1x1 tiles. But then look at the Milky Way set. That's basically half the size of the Death Star if you turn it sideways, and it's 1/5 of the price. Gotham City is just about as wide as the Death Star, and a good bit shorter, but unlike the world map, and mostly unlike the Milky Way, it's got some depth to it. It's like a 2.5D piece of art. Gotham City is 30% the price of the Death Star, and it's the closest to what I'm thinking the Death Star should have been. The main other set I would say is comparable would be the Wicked wall art, although obviously that's a much different scale. Now a Death Star done in this style would probably still cost more than Gotham City, but the point is it would be less than $1,000. So much of the price of it goes into making what's essentially just a big gray bangle, and that's kind of the same problem that the Batcave Shadow Box had. Mathematically, it wasn't an overpriced set, but because so many of the pieces went towards making a big black rectangle, it didn't feel like it was worth the price. Another criticism people have been having of the Death Star is that a lot of the rooms in it are kind of just diet versions of already existing sets that a lot of people have already bought. But if you make the Death Star wall art, suddenly it's not a diet version of an existing set anymore, it's a cool Paper Mario version of an existing set. The existing Death Star isn't really doing anything impressive with depth anyway. The Emperor's Throne Room doesn't need to be an actual room, we have a set of that. It can just be a cool piece of art depicting the Emperor's Throne Room, with maybe a slight bit of forced perspective on it. Imagine that bubble on the Wicked wall art set, except now it's Darth Vader's meditation chamber, and also it slides up instead of hinging up. This would make the set into kind of like a pop-up book or an advent calendar, except a brick-built advent calendar instead of the advent calendar that LEGO usually does. The functioning elevator, I think, still could work. It's already pretty flat, it's not an actual cylinder like the ones in the movies are, or like the one in the 2008 Death Star suggested that it was. In a wall art version, the elevator might end up actually sticking out the furthest to the front instead of being the furthest to the back. You also no longer need that ugly, bumpy back that can't go up against a wall because the window in the Emperor's Throne Room doesn't need to be 3D anymore if the whole set is 2D. Speaking of, it would probably also be easier to find space for, since a lot more people probably have that much wall space than they do shelf space. There are some drawbacks to this idea that I can think of. The laser would have to compromise. Though I think you could get away with cheating like a hieroglyph kind of perspective, where part of it faces the front and part of it faces the side. Maybe the laser dish could be removable, that way you could see the guts behind it. Some of the layering details would be harder, even stuff like the conference room table might not look as good. And it'd be harder to integrate the Imperial Shuttle, which is kind of a shame because that's like the one universally agreed good part of the set. Maybe it could be a gift with purchase and replace the most universally agreed upon worst part of the set. Making it flat would also make it harder to pose minifigures inside, though maybe there could still be 2, maybe 3 studs worth of floor sticking out of the wall art, depending on how good that looked, which would make it less flat but would still be way less pieces than the actual, like, gray wall going around the whole thing. You also lose a little bit of the interconnectivity of having the rooms actually all lead to each other with doors, but I think that's a small price to pay. And overall, I think all of these drawbacks are small prices to pay to get a much more affordable version of the set that has basically the same function to it.